Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Chit Chat Across the Pond. This is episode number 814 for May 28th, 2025, and I'm your host, Allison Sheridan. And this week, our guest is the lovely Adam Angst of Tidbits. Are you lovely today, Adam?
I am feeling extremely lovely. I'm sporting my Heartsorn Master Smile jacket, and we're all set to go.
Quite lovely. Well, we're gonna hit one topic fairly quickly and then deep dive a little bit more into the second one. You wrote an article that talked about something life-changing to me, maybe not life-changing to most people, but life-changing to some, about deep linking in web pages. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, this is actually something called text fragment linking, technically, and it's a technique by which you can select some text in a web browser, Control-click it, and then choose something like copy link to highlight or copy link with highlight, depends a little on the browser, and you get this special link. So it's the URL, just like you've always seen URLs. And then it's got some stuff at the end, which is the words that you selected with a few words on either side of what you selected. Make sure it's unique. And when you put that link somewhere and someone clicks it, they jump directly to what you selected with the words that you selected highlighted. This is brilliant.
That is so fantastic. So there is, oh, that's a loud truck. So there is a method where the web developer, like myself, I could put in a what's called an anchor link where I create a specific link to that. And I have to name it. And
Yep.
I hate it with every fiber of my being. It's clumsy. I can never remember it. I have to go look it up every single time. And if I have to do a lot of them, it's worth doing. But if it's just once, it's just like, that's terrible. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But this is just built into web browsers now, right?
Almost all of them. The holdout for a while was Brave, because the Brave developers sort of felt that this was a slight security issue. I guess they've both slightly changed their minds and bowed to pressure, seeing as everyone else has supported it. Took Firefox a while to come online, and Safari actually. And the reason for this, in large part, is that Google basically said, "We're doing this, and you can all join us or not." And Mozilla and Apple were understandably a little offended at that approach. But and the reason why Google was doing it was internal, of course, because they wanted to basically say, when you click a link in Google search results, sometimes it will highlight the text that answers your query. And so that was where it came from initially. So it was important for them to do in Chrome to support Google search. But it really is just better. And so, Mozilla resisted for a while, Apple resisted for a while, but pretty much everyone's on board now.
So the example that let me do an example of what you're talking about here. We've heard about query strings before, where you see / equals, and then you'll see key value pairs for searching in Amazon, for example. You'll get the little search thing, but this is the normal URL for the page, and then it's #::, text equals. All right, so you're not going to remember that. I was getting all ready to write a text expander snippet to do this when I got to the next paragraph where it said, no, you just right click and say copy link with highlight.
Yeah.
But I highlighted Mozilla and Apple in your article. And I imagine Mozilla and Apple has been used several times in this article. What it wrote was, and I'm not going to use all the ampersands and everything, but it wrote after that little text fragment, that little language, that text equals thing, it wrote until late 2024, and then a minus sign, and then Mozilla and Apple, comma, another minus sign, chose not to. So that's the words on either side of Mozilla and Apple in the specific place that I copied it. But you don't have to even look at that. You're just going to right-click copy, and you can send somebody an article that says, okay, look right here. This is right where you want to do it.
And what's even better about it is, think about if you've got one of those web pages that goes on and on and on and on and on. It's 30 pages long. You can link, 2/3 of the way down to something specific. And this is really helpful if, again, someone's written that fabulous, fabulous deep dive into some topic, and you want to point someone at something far down. because
Yeah, yeah.
it's this huge document. It's great. You love it. It's fabulous. But telling someone how to get to the particular spot that answers your question or that you're using as a support for some article, that's really tricky. And so this way you can just go, boom, here. And and also anyone can do it. Your example of the anchor links, only the developer of the page can do that. And
Right,
if you're
right.
a user, you might be able to figure out how to, like, piggyback on the anchor links that the developer has made of the page, but
If they don't
realistically,
exist.
they don't exist, you're host.
Well, there's also nothing to
Yeah.
keep me from using them on my own site. Like, if I wanted every heading to be clickable from an index at the top, I could do that without having to remember how to
Way
make
easier than
anchor links.
fussing with those stupid anchor links. I mean, I agree. I think anchor links, like, yes, I know how to make them generally speaking, but, I would have to look it up as well.
I know they exist, and I know there's a
Mm,
hashtag in there somewhere, but which one's the ID and the name and blah, blah, blah. Now, you discovered that,
precisely.
unfortunately, many times when you go to a web page, if you're reading something long form, what you get to is a PDF, and they don't work
Yeah.
in PDFs.
Oh, so sad. So sad. However, there is a workaround for PDFs, which, and hopefully if you're looking at it, you can get it exactly right. But it's something like you do pound page equals and the page number,
Yes,
and that will at least jump you to the right page in the PDF.
that's good.
Won't highlight anything, but it gets you a lot closer.
Right, right, instead of going through the 300 pages of the thing you're gonna do, so
Right. And also, it's worth noting that those URLs you have to create manually. Nothing will,
ah,
let you right click and say link to page 6. So that's a little bit too bad. But nonetheless, it's still a nice thing. I mean, because again, as you say, the PDFs are also one of those situations where, yeah, they're often long, and
that's
you
right,
really
and
need to
that's where you
point at
really
some
want it, yeah.
right. You need to point at page 42 when that's going to be way down, and no one's ever going to search for it or find it otherwise.
Well, we can dream, right? Maybe someday we'll get that too, right?
Well, and I mean the fact that it's happened, and it's starting. I mean it's been around for a while. Google did it in what 2020, 2021, something like that. And but only really with the last version of Safari 18, did Apple bring in full support, and Firefox is still kind of coming up to speed. There are extensions that you can add that will do this as well, and I actually am using one because the developers of Arc decided to implement this through a short URL redirector. So when you
Hmm,
choose copy link to highlight in Arc, you get this https://arc.net slash 15 characters. It's some kind of short
you
URL.
have no idea what it is?
No idea what it is, no idea where it goes, um, like, I mean, short URLs have their use, but I don't see any like, I don't hon honestly, no offense, I don't trust them. Like,
Mhm.
I want this URL to work as long as the URL can possibly work, and adding another point of failure, the arc.net reader, resolver service, in the middle of that just seems like a bad idea. So, I have in fact downloaded the Chrome extension that adds this feature, and I use that command instead of Arc's built-in command, so then I get a normal text fragment link, which just goes to the right site and has everything visible and all that.
Yeah, all those links would break if the redirect, server
Yeah,
was gone. Like,
right.
I don't
It
know if
just it
Arc
just seems
decided to
unnecessary.
say, "Stop supporting their own browser," for example, if that was to
Yeah,
happen, right?
we're not gonna go there
Yeah,
today.
I worried about bringing that up. That's probably a still an open wound, right?
I don't know if it's so much an open wound as a still bleeding wound. I mean,
Oh, okay.
like we don't even know what's going to stop that wound from bleeding. So no, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
my heart broke. Well, let's switch topics then and talk about something
Yes.
fun. You do surveys from time to time on Tidbits, and your latest one is about VPN usage.
Oh yeah, this one kind of got away from me, honestly. so so yeah, well, quite a while ago, I started this series of polls I call the "Do you use it" polls, because it was basically just like, hey, there's this kind of cool feature. Do you use it? And it's sort of an excuse to say, and if you don't, here's how.
Mhm.
Or
Right.
or with apps, do you use this app? And if not, what else do you use? or like we did one with with browsers. What web browser do you use? So it's kind of fun that way. And I run the polls in Discourse, which is the software behind Tidbits Talk, and so we can take hundreds and hundreds of responses. And what triggered this one was someone wrote to me and said, "Hey, did you see this piece about how a number of VPNs in the App Store? This is mostly iPhoney stuff, but nonetheless, um, are actually owned by Chinese companies, some with ties to the Chinese military." Now, for something you're using for privacy and security, routing it through China doesn't seem like quite the point.
Right, right. Not to mention China
I mean,
blocks VPN usage in China, but they'll sell us there so they can watch what we're doing?
I mean, my understanding is all companies in China are required to allow the Chinese government to monitor traffic. So, like,
Yeah.
this is just the way it is.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so like, okay, VPNs, I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, like the good ones are like in places like Switzerland,
Mhm. Yeah,
where,
that's a place I would trust, right?
you're right. I mean, people trust Switzerland with a lot of stuff. I mean, your money, your cheese, what else you want. Um, so, so in any event, so I thought, oh well, if there's all these VPNs you shouldn't trust, what one should you trust? And I don't actually use a VPN, so I don't really know very much about this topic personally, or don't have any opinions about the topic. I should say, I know how VPNs work for the most part, but I've never seen the use of in for my situation. So I thought, oh, we'll do a poll and I'll ask people what VPNs they use. Oh boy, this turned out to be a much more complicated question than I thought. So first of all, I learned with all my polls, you have to have an answer that allows people to say, "I don't use a VPN," or whatever
Okay.
it is. I don't use a web browser. I don't have an iPhone, so I can't answer your poll. Like, okay, fine. But this would have made sense, right? I mean, I don't use a VPN, and I wanted to see how many people were like me, because that's what it's all about. Turns out I'm actually a little unusual in this one. Um, so, uh, so I couldn't just ask what VPN do you use and have, none at the bottom, in part because discourse polls are limited to 20 answers, which
Oh.
it's an arbitrary number. But realistically, if you've got 20 answers, more than 20 answers, you've done something wrong. I mean, like you're not going to get any good information out of
Yeah, I was
it
gonna
at
say
some point.
5 anyway, but yeah.
Right. So so I was like, okay, and once I started looking into it, there are a lot of VPN services out there. So the ones we've all heard of, NordVPN and Proton VPN and Express VPN and things like that. So, but there are boatloads of them. And so this was okay. So at some point, I'll get to the list of ones. I'll need help in building the list because there's a lot. And then I got to like, well, so why are these people doing it? Like, it's not just enough to ask if they're using a VPN because there's a bunch of reasons why you might use a VPN. What are you trying to achieve? And so by the time I kind of wrapped my head around all this and actually had a big long thread in Tibbetts Talk discussing the poll, like what am I going to
Before
ask
doing
them?
the poll. Oh, okay.
Before doing the poll, I'm like,
That's a good
do
idea.
not be answering this. I'm not asking for answers. I'm asking for suggestions.
Asking for questions.
Right. And so I ended up with actually four questions. It was a four-part quiz,
Okay.
which was a little more complicated than I had quite intended. Um,
Now, before we get too
but
deep, we do need to
yeah,
say that, Tidbits readers' answers completely cover the full gamut of the average human, right?
absolutely, because we are all completely above average. We're
Yeah, there you
entirely
go.
above average. Yes, no, all of these New Year's polls I'm very clear about. They are reflections of a particular audience that is self-selecting in multiple ways.
Sure, sure.
So
Possibly a
like
little higher on the nerd scale.
higher in the nerd scale, frankly older. Tidbits readers skew older. Simple fact. We've been
Might
around
also
for a
be
long
more
time.
Apple-centric people
They're
who
only
might
Apple-centric people.
right, so they also might be more
Right.
privacy-oriented than, say, Android people. Some people choose Apple for privacy.
Right.
could be
But
another slant.
simultaneously, Macs have fewer security issues than Windows machines, so people might be more concerned if they were using Windows. It's hard to know.
Yeah. I
So
bet more of them wear
I w-
glasses.
and they all
Anyway,
sing well.
yes, that's the other thing. They're lovely.
so,
Okay, so you got it
so in
down to
any event,
just 4 questions?
just 4 questions, which I
Well,
think actually do a
it's good.
pretty good job on the whole. So the first question was this is my escape valve question. When do you use a VPN? And one
Oh,
of the answers is I don't. I never use a VPN.
well,
And
that's a
so the
good way of doing it.
utility, right? The utility of that was okay. Um, and the 4 answers are I use a VPN all the time, often but not always, only as necessary, and never. And so what I'm trying to get to there is always are the people who, like their employer says, all traffic must be protected at all times. No ifs, ands, or buts. Do it. Or the people who are just such privacy hounds that they are like, I will never have any traffic that escapes my VPN tunnel.
Yeah,
And
I do know a couple of my
yeah, sure.
listeners that do that. They just secure
Yep.
even from
There are
home.
people like that.
Mhm.
And but then there's the often but not always, and that's the realists. Because VPN usage is not without its problems. There
Mhm.
are issues that you will face, and you're running extra software on your computer, which may cause problems. And so, some websites will not be happy with you because you're popping out somewhere else in the world. We should probably talk about what a VPN is at some point soon. But
Yeah,
in any
what
event,
throw in that definition
okay,
real quick right
okay.
here.
So VPN, it stands for Virtual Private Network, and basically what it is you can think of it as this encrypted tunnel. So whatever hose you've got to the internet,
Mhm.
this is a hose inside the hose, which no one can see, and the traffic can see into because it's protected, encrypted, and the traffic pops out somewhere else on the internet. So instead of the traffic appearing to come from your machine or from your ISP anyway, it comes from the remote VPN server. Now, this is useful in a couple of different ways. One is everything's protected in the middle, so you're guaranteed that no one can see inside your thing. Another is that no one knows your IP address. So no one can guess where you're going because they can see that your the IP that your site that you're loading resolves to, gambling.com or porn.com or whatever it is. Your privacy is protected in that way. The other thing is that those remote servers, you can put one anywhere in the world you want if you're a VPN provider. And so if you want to, say, watch a local sporting event that has been blacked out in your market because it's on TV in your market, and there's a contract that says you're not allowed to stream this if you're in the same city as, where we're broadcasting this on local TV, you can't get it. But if you pop out and you're in England,
Right.
they don't care that you're watching the Boston Bruins. So
Right, right. My favorite, explanation of a VPN was Andy Walker, and I can't remember which tech show it was. I wanna say it was Tech TV. Anyway, he had a box full of kittens, a clear plastic box, and it had a hole through it, and he stuck his arm through it, and his arm was covered in peanut butter, and the kittens go up, and they lick his arm like crazy, and then he stuck a tunnel, a little clear plastic tube in, and he stuck his arm through the tube, and the kittens couldn't get to the peanut butter. It was perfect, right? I mean, it didn't handle the
okay.
trying to watch the Bruins when you're coming from England, but,
Right.
the traffic sniffing was there.
Yeah, the traffic sniffing is pretty good. So it gets you around access restrictions. Students in schools that block games, for instance,
Mm,
like to use
mm.
VPNs as a way of getting past whatever IP restrictions the schools have. Employers may prevent people from getting out to certain sites. Oh, I don't want to watch it. Reading Facebook at work. Well, you have a VPN that pops you out in another state, then you're not on that network. So,
Okay,
so that kind of stuff happens. So
okay,
it's a lot of privacy and security and geolocation and other kind of restrictions. Um, those are the big ones. I mean, there's a
okay,
few
so
other. You have
So
the
you
reasons.
asked the when question,
Hang on just
which
a sec.
is kind of
Okay, sorry. Sorry, important thing I had to check.
he's back. So you asked the when question, which is more of a frequency, not a why. And what did you
Right.
find in your results?
Well, so it was fascinating because, I had thought again that maybe that I'm fairly common in my lack of use of a VPN,
Mhm.
but in fact, the never answer and the all the time answer were the same at 16%. So we're kind of bookending.
Oh,
So minorities on sort of either end of the spectrum, and then often but not always was another 26%, so fair number of people using it there, but only as necessary, which is such as you're traveling, you're at a public Wi-Fi network, and you wanna protect your traffic, so someone on the same network can't sniff it, or you're trying to access geo restrictions. So y when you have a reason to do it, you flip on your VPN, 42%. 42% of the people. So that's the big answer, really. That's why most people are doing it. Now, to be fair, um, when you still, run that math, 84% of the respondents use a VPN.
yeah,
So
that
that's
definitely
like,
does
oh,
talk to the
okay.
self-selecting audience, but yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, I did see some other numbers and other things that it's still pretty common elsewhere as well. I mean, like
okay.
Tidbits audience may be a little bit higher, but like 50% of people do it. And some other surveys I've seen. And part of the reason it's so common is that a lot of employers just require it. Just you wanna work here, you want a laptop using the VPN. Simple as that.
Okay.
You're on the road, you're gonna use VPN. And then frankly, the geo restrictions bug a lot of people.
Mhm.
That it's just so annoying when you can't watch whatever it is you think you should be able to. Now, I did not get into this in the article, but there is a little bit of the, well, how is that different than downloading
A
an
torrent or
illicit
something.
version of something?
Yeah.
Right. I'm not sure it really is. I mean, the licensing is a little funky. Like why are, I mean, I ran into this, what was it? Some TV show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Last time I was in Europe, I remember what this is when I had COVID in
Mm.
on a trip to Greece.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible way to do things. But any event, I ended up watching a lot of TV because I was really, really sick, and all my Tanya and our other friends were doing other things all day, and so I was able to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Netflix, no problem. Well, at the time, Netflix wasn't showing that in the US. It wasn't licensed for
mhm.
their US audience. It was only licensed. So I watched like, I don't know, 12 shows or something like that. Then we get on the plane to come home and can't get it anymore. Well,
Oh,
that
no.
doesn't seem fair. I'm still paying Netflix. It's not like
See,
I'm
that's the
pirating
thing.
it.
Now I want the bifurcated question. Do you use a VPN to watch, geo-restricted content because you think it's unfair or because you're just too cheap to pay for it, you know? Because the unfair one,
Yeah.
I understand. I
Yeah.
wanted to watch the, women's gymnastics during the Olympics one year, and the US was not showing it. I mean, now they do, but they weren't, and so that's the one time I used a VPN to bypass geo restrictions because I was like, "Well, I'm watching the US team. I'm in the US. I mean, come on, why can't I watch that?"
Yeah.
Or it's my home team, and now I can't watch it because it's my home team and they're playing at home. That doesn't make any sense. Those kinds of things I understand completely. Stealing content because you're too cheap to pay for it, am not a fan of that.
So interesting. It would be an interesting question.
Mhm.
But certainly
And
it's one of
whether
those
they gave
situations where there's a
truthful answers.
right. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't actually make sense in the internet world. Like these geo restricted licenses, for
Mhm.
instance. That's a standard thing. Like when you're a book author, for instance, there are licenses that allow translations and overseas sales and things like that. And that they're just the way they are because they're physical objects. Well, suddenly they're not physical objects anymore,
Yeah.
and so
Now
and
you're just being
broadcast
mean.
again. Right. Broadcast used to be literally you were broadcasting it to a certain area. You couldn't go beyond that. So it made sense. So, any event,
Alright, so
that's
what
an
was the
interesting one.
second question?
So the second question was again trying to get a little bit of tease out why people are using the VPNs. And this one you could vote for multiple reasons. So these will not add up to 100%. Um, The 5 answers, and one of them was probably slightly too subtle for what I should have done, were security, privacy, access, anonymity, and control, and I'll get to explain each of those.
Okay.
Security was the big one. 69% of people said that they use a VPN to improve their security, and that's basically preventing snooping, the kittens. You don't want people looking at your traffic en route.
Okay.
Um, Privacy was next, at 57%, and that's the hiding the IP address. Um, and so, to my mind, this is a little overdone in the sense of, is it that big a deal that your ISP knows where you're going, even if they don't know what you're doing when you get there? Because they're basically, they can see what DNS lookups you're making. So
Right.
if you load apple.com, your ISP or whoever's managing your DNS resolvers says, "Oh, they asked for apple.com. They must be going to apple.com." And so that's the kind of thing where I was a little surprised that people cared as much about that as they seem to.
Do you think that
But
was a misunderstood question? Did you give them any hints to what you meant by security versus
I said to
privacy?
just hide, prevent snooping versus hide IP address.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
the
and the
third one
results,
was
57% said that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then that one, again, that may have been badly worded another way too. I'll get to it in a second. The third most popular was at 52% was access. And this is really that geo restrictions or getting past filters that are blocking certain types of sites, things like that. So I think this one's pretty real. Um, and then the fourth one was, again, this is probably a bit of a mistake, or it's too subtle. It was anonymity. So privacy and anonymity are not the same thing, but they're pretty similar. And so privacy is I don't want anyone to know where I'm going. Anonymity is I don't want anyone to know who I am. And
Right.
hiding the IP address comes into that, plays into that. But there's other things that you would do if an anonymity was what was really important. And one of the big ones is does the VPN log access? So if you think
Hmm.
about it, the VPN server knows
Right.
what your IP address is. They have
Right.
to. It's like not possible for them not to. And if they log it, that means that some government, law enforcement could subpoena those logs and say, aha, he was going to apple.com. Get him now. Charge him a tariff. Um, and and so I was a little surprised. So that was 42%. I think very few people actually cared that deeply about anonymity. And I probably should have combined those, and I should have just ditched the anonymity one and stuck with privacy.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Um,
about anonymity. I'm gonna go use a VPN, for anonymity, and then I'm gonna go out to, Facebook and,
yeah,
l
yeah,
you
right. Anonymity, you have to never log into something on the other end, because
Right.
that automatically identifies you. It
Yeah,
connects it
yeah.
to you.
So what are
So, and
42% of the people doing
as
on
I
a
said,
VPN? Like, they're not Googling, they're not
I'm guessing that it was just they were kind of conflating it with privacy.
probably.
Um, and then the
Okay.
last one is control, and this is mostly what I was kind of meant by this was remote network access. So this is
Mhm.
the you want to access resources on a remote network, and you're going to connect your tunnel to that network, and so
Right.
and this is actually not so much true anymore, as I was informed in the comments. But like, if an employer, if you're working remotely and you wanted to get to the file servers at work,
Yeah,
you want to be on the work network,
right.
and get to the file servers and the printers and all of those kinds of things. And so you use your VPN to basically put yourself on that network remotely.
So people told
Or
you that's not used anymore? How do you get onto the company
people
network?
don't get companies just don't do that sort of stuff much anymore. Apparently, it's much more common to use cloud services.
Ah,
Just
okay.
not using file servers. File servers are not a thing as much, as
Yeah,
what was suggested,
but
and
then
even printers could be internet-based printers. You
huh.
know, so I guess it was just. I mean, again, this is not my world. So when someone commented that, oh yeah, that was a thing, certainly, but it's less so now. Like, oh, okay, good to know.
Huh.
Um,
So, with your audience being skewing more technical, the remote network access answers might be people using Tailscale?
Yeah, Tailscale was the big one. And
And we
Tailscale
should explain
is
what
pretty neat.
Tailscale is.
Yeah, Tailscale is pretty neat. Basically, it allows you to um, connect back to your entire network from outside. And so, for those who remember the Apple service Back to My Mac,
Yeah.
um, it's essentially like that, so that you're off traveling and you can get back to you can basically get back to all of your machines and your file server and your printers and all those kinds of things that exist on your private local network, which is normally very, very hard to do because it's usually behind multiple little NAT gateways and things like that. Basically, you got to jump through a lot of hoops to get there. And so Tailscale allows you to just punch through all that stuff and go
Yeah,
directly to it.
I'm a big fan of Tailscale, use it extensively, have it on almost all the time, and when we get to the actual usage of a VPN in a little bit, I wanna bring up a couple
Yeah.
of anecdotal experiences with it. But yeah, it's super easy to set up, you don't need a server or anything like that, you just need to go, "I would like to have Tailscale, please, make it go," and I've got it on everything, I
Make
can get
it
to anything on my
so.
network. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
free
So
for
any
most of the normal
yeah.
usage.
Yeah, no. So I said I didn't quite and I didn't quite do this, phrase this one as well as I thought. It is interesting when you're building polls because you don't necessarily know what people are going to misconstrue until you've got enough answers that you can't restart it without losing everything.
I very
So,
rarely find the numerical answers, the bar charts and the numbers to be the
yeah.
interesting part. It's usually what the people say in the comments that turn out to give me more understanding of what I was asking about.
And that's one reason why we do it exactly this way, where you fill out the poll and then you tell us what you really want to say. Uh, and then when I write it up, I usually go through those comments and kind of, distill what people were saying into my discussion. Um,
Oh,
now,
and I see you have a link in the article to, Glenn Fleischman's, uh,
yes,
story on
article
how
about
to give,
Tailscale.
use Tailscale as remote access to your LAN, and I'm sure if Glenn wrote it, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Now, one of the issues here, um, is also that I've sort of been saying there's these different situations where you want to use a VPN, and some of them are funny. Like, oh, well, my employer makes me.
Mhm.
Okay, that's really different than I choose to do this, or I want to watch, the Boston Bruins and I can't, or so the next thing that I asked was what type of VPN do you use? Because it turns out, oh my goodness, does it get complicated? Um, there's there's multiple things that call themselves VPNs and are not quite, or that are kind of limited in some way. And
Hmm.
so, the things that I think of a VPN as, again, the NordVPNs and Proton VPNs and Tunnel Bears and whatnot, those are system level VPNs that just like all your traffic goes through the tunnel. It's right. It's all there.
Okay.
No questions asked. However, and that's often gonna be true of, like, if your employer makes you use a VPN or you host your own. There are people who out there do their own because it's not actually that hard, a lot of routers can actually do it, um, and things like that. So what I was trying to tease out here is just, like, what are people doing? But then you get into the funny ones. So, both Opera first, then Brave, and then Vivaldi have all got VPN-like things that you can turn on while you're using them. But of course, by default, those only encapsulate the traffic from that browser.
And where's the it's running in the browser? A
It's
browser-based
in the
VPN?
browser.
I don't know about that.
And yeah, and then it gets more complicated because it turns out what Opera's doing is what's called a secure encrypted proxy and not a VPN. And I'm not 100% sure exactly like how you distinguish between those. I think it has to do with the protocols involved.
Hmm,
So
okay.
a secure encrypted proxy is encrypting everything and it's popping out somewhere else. It's proxying the data. So basically, instead of your traffic coming out of your machine, it's coming out of some other machine.
Okay.
Um, but it's not using a VPN protocol like WireGuard or OpenVPN
Oh, okay.
or et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So, there's like 10 of those too. Ugh, gets complicated. So yeah, but then Brave and Vivaldi are using real VPN technologies, and they even have like services you can subscribe to make it not just the browser, but the whole thing, the whole machine. So we're back to a system level VPN.
Huh.
Head starting to explode. And so this one, I was like, basically just what do you use? Oh, and no, these secure proxies. Also, there's a ton of extensions like Chrome extensions. I don't know, Safari's probably got them too. Firefox add-ons that will do this secure proxying thing, and a whole bunch of them kind of sketchy, frankly. Like, why would you do this from some random company that you've never heard of that doesn't have that many downloads in the Chrome store? Like,
Yeah,
this
extensions
seems
are
like a bad
dicey to
idea.
start with, but this would be the category I'd really shy away from.
And the problem is a lot of them will even use the term VPN.
Hmm.
So, you're like, I don't know what this is. Any event, so when I this was another another one where people could use multiple answers, but realistically, it came down to 86% use a system level VPN, just the stuff we think of as VPNs. And when people say 15% of people said they use their employer VPN, and I'm betting they double answered to system level and employer because they would always have.
They
I mean, like
should,
every
yeah.
employer VPN is going to be
Right.
system level. Um, 10% of people said they use a browser VPN, which I was a little surprised by. There's not that many of them, Opera, Brave, and Vivaldi. About 9% people said they hosted their own, which that actually feels to me about right. In terms
Hmm.
they might have double answered to system level VPN too. And happily, only 3% people said they used a secure proxy browser extension. And I was pleased at that just because it just doesn't seem like a good idea. Like there's so many. I mean, one of the really big issues with these VPNs in general is you're putting all your eggs in one basket or one tunnel, as the case may be. You have to trust who's ever holding that basket.
You
You
really
know?
should have asked how many of you use a free VPN and then just wrote to
Yeah.
each of them and slapped them. No.
Well, but simultaneously use a free VPN if you're just trying to bypass geo restrictions. I just want to watch this one track meet in Switzerland. That's the all I want to
Yes.
do. I don't want to pay
Yeah.
for this. I just want to watch the track meet. So it's so messy, so messy.
Yeah.
So finally, we got down to which VPN do you use? And this was where I had tried to, take the ones that were the most recommended and all that and, put them all in. I think I actually did a pretty good job that no one said, "Oh, or I shouldn't say, we didn't get a lot of comments from people saying you didn't include mine. I mean, we did get some, and I knew that we're gonna get some. But what it really came down to was, I would say the top, I don't know, 5 to 7 are all pretty well known and reasonable. So NordVPN and Proton VPN at the top, 26% and 21%. Then Molvad, which I bundled with something with Mozilla VPN, which is the Firefox people sell. It was 11%. I bundled those because Mozilla VPN uses the Molvad network. So
Yeah.
it's
Right,
it's
right.
different software, but it's the same network. So I'm like, trying again to fit things into 20s, the
Yeah.
20 answers. Um, then ExpressVPN at 10%, private internet access at 9%, TunnelBear at 8%, Surfshark at 7%, and then there's some others: VPN Unlimited, Windscribe, PureVPN that got a couple of answers, DuckDuckGo, Privacy Pro, et cetera, et cetera. And then there were some that I'm actually a little surprised about: Norton VPN, F-Secure VPN, TorGuard, and Guardian that got no answers.
Huh. Interesting.
I was like, really? No one uses these. I mean, again, Norton and F-Secure, pretty well-known companies, security companies.
Yeah.
So I'm a little surprised. And Guardian's what's underneath Brave's VPN.
I
So
think
I'm a little
Norton, you
surprised
might
that.
have to put the word security in quotes these days, right? I think their
Well,
reputation may
that
have
may be
gone down a
why.
little bit.
That may
Yeah.
be why. So, but even with this one, oh my goodness, it gets complicated because, okay, so Nord Security, which owns NordVPN, merged with Surfshark a couple of years ago. So they're completely separate services and they operate independently and they have different pricing and all that, but they're owned by the same company. What does that mean? I mean, should they be considered together? Not, I don't know. Um, I mean, they're different. It is different software and everything. So, but they're again owned by the same company. And then ExpressVPN and private internet access, along with CyberGhost, which got just a couple of answers, are owned by a company called Cape Technologies, a British holding company, which has bought up a bunch of security-related firms, including Intego. So, the French antivirus company. And so it's a little weird that this one company owns, 3 or 4 there's actually some other VPNs that aren't even on the list, and Intego and other sites and things like that. That's like, okay, it's a little bit. But then it turns out that Cape Technologies used to be known as Crossrider, and they used to develop ad injection adware, sorry.
So this was probably the most surprising thing that I read in here. A couple of years ago, Consumer Reports did a huge study on VPNs. I mean, they went through 64 different VPNs and they rated them by all different things. And they wrote, it's the kind of article I would have liked to have done a deep link to in the PDF, if you get my drift.
Right, precisely.
And anyway, I went through and took the top 10 contenders, and then I created my own criteria of what I was looking for in a VPN. I figured if I go with their top 10 and then I give it my criteria, then I can choose some. And Mulvad was one of the ones I tested, and a couple of the others. But I ended up choosing PIA. So when I saw what you wrote in here about that, I thought, I wonder if that was known when they wrote that article. And so I did a search for Cape, and sure enough, that was in the article that they were owned by this company Cape, and that they used to be Crossrider. And there's even more nefarious stuff in there about the CEO doing some. I'm trying to remember. Was it check fraud or something? I mean, it didn't sound like a stand-up guy to me when I read that. So that kind of made me. I came out going, yeah, PIA, woohoo! Everybody should use PIA. It's inexpensive and it's great. It's awesome. Now I'm feeling a little dirty having read that.
Well, and one of the other companies that they own is one of those sites that reviews all sorts of security products. And gee, guess what? VPNs rank really highly at the top of their VPN articles. Like,
yeah, I hate that.
So yeah, like it sort of falls into the category of, they and to be fair, Cape acquired all these companies. So, and we have no knowledge that they're doing anything bad or anything like that. The companies were presumably highly regarded at one point. And Cape spent a lot of money on some of them. I think like $900 million or something on ExpressVPN. So, I mean, this is real, it is legitimate, and it's probably a kind of going concern, that it's better to make money doing something legitimate if you can, because then people don't try to shut you down.
Well, now Crossrider, when they changed names to Cape, they pinky sweared they were going to be good now.
Right. There's no way to know. I mean, that's really the problem with all of this VPN stuff is there's no way to know. They can say anything. They can say, we're not logging your IP addresses, and then do it.
Well, that was part of the article from Consumer Reports was, do they allow their books to be audited to show that they're not logging? That was one of the things they had, and PIA did okay on that one.
Yeah. So I mean, my take is that, the whole being associated with Cape, it's a strike. I mean, probably there's nothing to worry about, but if you've got other choices that are exactly the same in terms of price and capability and whatnot, I'd personally probably stay away from them. Just because.
So it's on the scale, but maybe not a deal breaker unless you're comparing two things that are equivalent, like you say. Yeah,
precisely. Yeah, and so that's tough. But when it came right down to it, having spent all this time in this world, and there's actually two other things that have come up, which I didn't mention in the article, and I'm slightly regretting. It's one of those situations where so many details in my head, and I forgot to pull these two back out. One is Apple's iCloud Private Relay. So how does that fit in? Right? It's just if you're an iCloud Plus subscriber, you just click it, and poof, you've got iCloud Private Relay on. What does that mean? So iCloud Private Relay is not a VPN. But what it does do is it uses a double proxy system to ensure that no one can see where you're going with when you're browsing the web in Safari. And
Okay,
so
right.
it basically the first proxy knows there's two pieces of information involved, your IP and the remote IP. And basically the way iCloud Private Relay works is it encrypts them separately so that when it's talking to the second relay, the first one transmits the site, I don't want to get too detailed because I'm going to get it slightly wrong. Basically, it makes sure that the information can get out to the internet and back to you, but neither of the two proxies between you can know all of the information.
Yeah, they each have half of the information,
They each
so
have
they
half
can't
of
put
the
it together.
information, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And it's really easy to turn on as long as you're paying for iCloud Plus. Boom, clicking it, and you've got that. But it's only for Safari and for all other unencrypted traffic, Apple says. That's all we know about what that means. And so I can't quite internalize how complete that is. I just
Yeah,
just
what
don't
else is
know.
it? If you
And
make a
what traffic is unencrypted?
if you make a web app out of a website, I wonder whether that is included in is it still under iCloud Private Relay?
Yes,
Wonder.
because it would be the Safari engine, I'm almost
I think so.
certain.
Yeah.
So that one is a weird little exception that I think we'll come back to in just a second. And then the other one is Cloudflare, which is one of the big sort of content distribution companies that they do a ton of stuff to make basically to make it easier to serve websites on the internet. We use them. We use them for caching. So basically, I don't know, they cache some vast amount of the traffic that Tidbits serves for free. I mean, it's amazing.
Right.
And
Love it.
so our server doesn't take all that kind of stuff, and they also protect us against a whole lot of bot attacks. But so Cloudflare has a service called 1.1.1.1, which is a DNS resolver. So you use that for your DNS, and it's going to be faster and better. And Cloudflare says more private because they're not your ISP and they're not logging you and they don't care who you are. So okay, that's good. And then they have an upgrade called Warp. And what Warp does is it's as I understand it, it's basically a secure proxy, sending traffic routing your traffic through the Cloudflare edge network. So it's not going out your ISP. It's going out, Cloudflare's edge network, which is kind of everywhere. The whole point of Cloudflare is they've got servers everywhere. But it's doing so in kind of a transparent way so that like the remote websites know what your IP address is, not protecting you from them knowing that. And it's not using the VPN protocols. So it's doing encryption, but it's not well, actually, no, I take it back. That one is. Stuff's driving me nuts. It does use WireGuard, but it's a customized version of WireGuard. And yeah, right. But again, it's only, it just drives me up the wall. This came up in the conversation, and it's not hiding your IP address. It doesn't allow you to change your location specifically, and it doesn't anonymize traffic. So those are the like VPN kind of things that you would get with a real VPN that you're not getting with Warp. So again, all these like ifs, ands, and buts of what's a VPN. But when all this is put together, I was like, still not using a VPN. I don't see the need.
So,
Because
but
here's the
one of the
thing.
reasons you don't leave the house, or when you leave your house, but you're running at the time. You're not in coffee shops. You're not.
It's true. It's true. Um, but here's what the situation is really. Almost all traffic that leaves your computer, whether you're at your house or not, is encrypted. So, I mean, when was the last time you ended up at an HTTP web page rather than HTTPS? Um, and the answer is very, very, very seldom. That I mean, Google has stats on this. I believe that from Mac OS, it's 98% of the traffic and Chrome to Google traffic. I mean, it's in Google, so it's like own their own stuff. But 97% of the traffic through Chrome is encrypted.
So I think one of the primary reason I use a VPN when I'm at on hotel Wi-Fi or I'm at a Starbucks is because I'm on this. If I'm not, I'm on the same network as everybody else in that facility, and regardless of where I'm going on the internet, I'm on the same network with those people, and I can get a man-in-the-middle attack. They can do things to fuss around, to get into my computer, and I don't want them doing that. That's the main reason.
Well, so a VPN isn't necessarily going to stop either. Well, it might stop a man-in-the-middle attack. It's not going to stop someone getting into your computer
If I'm not
because
on that network,
you're
I'm
on the
not on
network.
the network.
You are on the network. If you're using public Wi-Fi, you're on the network. That's your network. You're sharing traffic. You're tunneling all your external traffic, but you're just tunneling external traffic.
But I'm not available in a peer-to-peer sense within that network. I'm not there.
But that's not related to the VPN.
Why not?
No, because the VPN is only talking about external traffic.
But my IP address is not inside that network. I'm not inside that network anymore. If I check what my IP address is, it is not in that network. So,
Right,
for
because
example, when
IP is external. So you're still on the Wi-Fi network because you
I
have
am
to
still
be.
getting internet access through that Wi-Fi network, correct?
Right.
But
So
I'm not.
basically it's what it means. What it comes down to is your computer is not answering to any outside stuff, anything coming in.
Mhm.
If you, but you're still like.
Well, you remember the old days where you could look at somebody's iTunes music just within because of Bonjour and all that kind of thing? I
Right,
don't
right,
think any of
right,
that's exposed, right?
right.
Because 'Cause I'm not
I don't
there.
know.
Yeah. I wish I was better at explaining this, but my solution, what I use, and we didn't get into the details of this, but I'm sure Glenn did, is if you have Tailscale set up, you can turn a switch that you can turn on and off quite easily to use a device in your home network as an exit node. So my Synology is always online. So when I'm away from home and I'm in Japan, like I was a couple of weeks ago, I keep Tailscale on because I can get to all my stuff, and then I turn on the exit node as my Synology, and without doing anything, once that's turned on, as every bit of traffic I do goes to my house and then turns around and goes back out from there.
I'm boy, we need to
I'm not
find
answering that
a
question.
networking
This is
person.
other stuff.
Right. Yeah, no. What I'm struggling with is that anyone who joins my Wi-Fi network, I know they exist on that network. Guaranteed. They show up in my Eero as a device. They have to. They cannot
Yeah. Yeah.
associate with my
Yeah,
SSID
that's right.
without me knowing that they are there. And if they're associating with the SSID, there's a communication between the devices
Yes.
at some level.
Yes.
And so what I'm saying is that all of my external traffic, I'm not responding to. I don't have any servers set up on my machines. My machine shouldn't be responding to any outside any requests coming to it.
Mhm.
That all of my external traffic is encrypted. HTTPS, if it's mail, it's encrypted by SMTP or IMAP is encrypted by TLS. Again, nearly all. It's like not quite 100%, but it's very, very
Mhm.
close. Um, iMessage, that sort of thing, completely. So the only thing that becomes, generally speaking, unencrypted is DNS. And so it gets back to the how much do you care that someone knows where you're going on the internet? They don't know what you're saying, but they know where you're going.
I'm really glad to know that 38% of the NoSilla castaways listening are yelling at their devices right now that I'm forgetting something, 'cause there is more to it than this, and I am not coming up with it right off the top of my head, but,
I mean, if you read through all the comments on the poll article, there's people who are like, yeah, I know, like, I don't care if someone can sniff my DNS lookups, and everything else is protected. And so I don't think I'm alone in this, in terms of, like, I'm just not seeing the utility if privacy, security is really, security is your only thing. I mean, privacy, again, I'm just not concerned if someone can sniff my DNS. I'm not really concerned at on my local my home network either. Like, I just don't go places what I'd somehow be embarrassed by.
I don't have a problem with my home traffic, but when I'm away from home, I'm pretty.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that this has changed over time, right? This is definitely one of those things that I still remember when it was a big deal that HTTPS was being forced by some browsers. Like they
Mhm.
would
Right.
look at the server and they was like, oh, I see that it's doing both HTTP and HTTPS. I'm gonna switch it because you didn't want it. But I think it's just not happening anymore. And so, um, if that's the reason. I mean, obviously, it's never a problem to have more security, right? It's sort of like it's you put up another wall. You ask, you ask for another password. It's not going to make you less secure in any way, shape, or form. It's going to make you more secure, but I'm not sure it's going to make you more secure at the level of, large amounts as opposed to very, 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 very small amounts. And, that's the question of
I
whether
see
it's
what you're
worth it
saying.
to you.
Over time, the answer to this question may change as things have become more and more secure without a
Yes.
VPN, and that
Yes.
so
I
this
mean, VPNs have been
question
around for a
5
long
years ago.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even see this on, I think I linked to it in the article on some of the Google graphs about how heavily HTTPS and TLS were used.
Mhm.
And you can see even in those, there's changes over time. So it is definitely not it's not something that has been always been the case. Um, but I think it's what's the takeaway that I brought to this was modern day dangers are different than they used to be. I mean, nowadays phishing is really the big one. Like, this stuff is getting more and more, more and more, more and more difficult to identify. Um, and you get something that looks absolutely 100% correct, and you click through, and oh, it asks you for your login, and then you're in a world of trouble because you
Right.
did give it your credentials, and a VPN ain't going to help that one bit.
Not one bit. Yeah. Well, if we go down
So
that rabbit hole or rat hole, which is it?
I
Probably
like
rat
rabbits
because it's
better than
awful.
rats. Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
rabbits are
it's
cute.
the really icky one. Yeah, that's a good point. If you can put all these, locks on your doors, but if you stick your head out the window, you know, you're
Yeah,
not
right.
saving yourself.
Right, or yeah, it's it was a fascinating exercise to go through this, and actually one of the things that, I was gonna get back to iCloud Private Relay is if you're more on my side of things and saying, "Well, it looks like everything is pretty much encrypted," um, iCloud Private Relay deals with things that aren't encrypted. So if there is something that's somehow going out unencrypted, iCloud Private Relay will at least make it so that it can't be connected to you. So it won't. I don't think it encrypts it. It's a little hard to tell. I think that the trap, but it's bouncing in such a way that it can't be connected back to you. So sort of from the privacy standpoint, iCloud Private Relay will kind of take care of the rest of those whatever remaining unencrypted protocols there are. And I've tried to figure out what that might be. Like if someone uses an old FTP server, not an SFTP server or an
Mm.
FTPS server,
Mhm.
that would be unencrypted. If you have like an old ISP that has not updated their mail protocols, their mail servers to use TLS, the mail would then be unencrypted. Um,
Okay.
um, there was some suggestion in the searches that like some online games might not encrypt their traffic, possibly for just performance reasons. Unclear if that's actually a problem. I mean, like I'm not sure game traffic is going to be exactly, I don't know, problematic if someone sniffs it. you know?
Let me ask you a
Go
question.
left, go left.
Do you turn on iCloud Private Relay?
I do. I should check. I should make sure
Trying to
I'm saying
remember.
that. Um,
I just checked and mine's off, and I seem to remember this is one of those things that causes collateral damage, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Something else got icky and annoying. Not icky, just annoying when I turned it on, and I can't remember what it
So
was.
I do have it on, but I want to say I did a Tidbits article about this. It's popped up in my searches recently. Yeah, let's see
As
if
he
I can.
searches the internet live here,
As I
we can
search
see it happen.
Tidbits to do this. Um, yeah, so actually, I had an article about not a year ago, basically with iCloud Private Relay was causing problems itself,
Mhm.
and so you needed to just turn it off for a little while. And even when you turn it off, it even says like turn off until tomorrow, so that you can just like it's being a
Yeah.
problem right now, but I want it back again.
I
But there
just
was
wish I could
something
remember why I
else.
stopped. It's
Here
like
we
there's
go.
a go ahead.
Yeah. There was to say, and 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago, an article called "Solving Connectivity Problems Caused by Interlocking Apple Privacy Settings." And basically, it was like you have too many different little privacy things going on, and
Mhm.
they seemed to cause problems. And so again, you can just turn some stuff off, see what happens, and maybe that resolves it. Because yeah, again, whenever you get into this stuff, and this is a little bit partly why I don't use VPNs, right? I don't need to
Mhm.
introduce another thing that can go wrong.
Yeah.
So,
I ran into the oddest problem with Tailscale when I was in Japan. Everything worked fine except syncing Apple Photos.
hmm,
I on my I could see that the photos had synced to iCloud from my phone, but I couldn't get them onto my Mac. And I turned off Tailscale and it went, "Yep, here it is." Everything swooped right back down on the very high-speed internet in
yeah.
Japan. And I wrote to the Tailscale people, and oddly, even though I wrote to him and said, "I pay you nothing. Will you help me anyway?" And the guy went back and forth with me, but he got into some real nerdy stuff that I don't understand at all, and I kinda went, "Okay, I'm just gonna walk away and I'll just trade off when it doesn't work," 'cause I didn't
Right.
understand what he was trying to teach me. I felt bad because he was trying to help me, but I just didn't know what he
Yeah.
was way above my head in it. So,
Yeah.
turning those things on and off, I can see it, but, yeah, this has been real interesting. If people want to read this, the title is "Do You Use It? VPN Use is Widespread." And of course, there will be a link in the show notes to the Tidbits article. Anything I've forgotten to ask about, Adam?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. As I said, it is a fascinating thing, and there's no really wrong answer. Like as I said in the very end of the article, is like I'm choosing not to use a VPN, but I wouldn't criticize anyone who did. You know, there's there's all sorts of really good reasons. There's ones that are probably overstated. Like I care very deeply about this. Yeah, probably not that big a deal, but go you be you. Like you're not hurting anything by doing this. And I was actually kind of surprised. I mean, like the services are actually pretty inexpensive, particularly if you plan to be doing this a lot and you want to pay them for 2 years. It's like $3 a month or something. So not
Yeah,
not
they
a
aren't
huge
much.
investment. Yeah, not a huge investment. Again, seem to be pretty well reviewed. So it's easy to avoid anything that you might feel is dodgy. But yeah, there's no harm in doing so.
All right. Well, this is an exhaustive and fun study. I like the way you approached how you did this. So this is great. If people want to find Adam, they should go to tidbits.com and read all the wonderful stuff.
All right, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Chit Chat Across the Pond. Did you notice there weren't any ads in the show? That's because this show is not ad supported. It's supported by you. If you learned something or maybe you were just entertained, consider contributing to the Podfeed podcast. You can do that by going over to podfeed.com and look for the big red button that says support the show. When you click that button, you're going to find different ways to contribute. You can donate one time through the big donate button with a credit card or Apple Pay, or you can use PayPal. If you want to make a recurring contribution, click the Patreon button. Keep in mind, I don't charge Patreon for Chit Chat Across the Pond or Programming by Stealth episodes, just once a month for the NosillaCast. That keeps it simple. If you want to contact me for any reason, you can email me at allison@podfeed.com, and you can follow me on Mastodon at podfeed.com/mastodon. Maybe you want to talk to other Nosilla castaways? You can do that in our Slack group at podfeed.com/Slack. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed.